The punishment for sin, the penalty for sin is eternal death. What does that communicate? We talked about this all week now. What does penalty exist for? Penalty is not there so God can feel better by getting to beat somebody up. Penalty exists to enforce the law for the public good, for the sake of love and the well-being of all. This is the reason why we have penalties, or ought to have. This ought to be our reason. God being full of love and full of wisdom, all His works are like that. This is why He has the penalty of hell, for the public good and the welfare of all. And so if we have sinned and violated His law, we have procured the penalty of eternal hell. And this is what we say as Christians. I tell you, I've sinned. And in my life I haven't. I don't say that lightly. It's to my shame, the Bible says. Sin is to our shame, not to be boasted in. But I tell you, the same breath as a Christian, I'm not going to die. I'm going to heaven when I die. That's what I'm telling you as a Christian. What happened there? The penalty is hell, but I tell you I'm going to heaven. How is that penalty set aside? How did God pass over that? I owe Him eternal hell for my sin. Just one sin. All the sins I've committed, I would have countless hells. And all of them eternal. If I got what I deserved. And the penalty that I procured is this eternal hell. And the atonement is an arrangement God has made by which the penalty of eternal hell may be avoided without doing a disrespect to His justice. Why does penalty exist? To maintain the authority of the law. Can that be accomplished by some other means so that He can pass over our hell? Can the law be encouraged and maintained and enforced and kept strong? Can God show us how much He values His law by some other means? And if He can, then He can rightly, justly pass over the penalty we owe Him and show us mercy. And we cannot say back to God, "Oh God, you disrespected your law." Because the law is enforced. The law is maintained. The authority, the teeth of it is kept strong. And if that is done, then He can pass over our hell and extend to us His mercies. This is what is being done in the atonement. Atonement is not the penalty itself being inflicted on another. Not what we deserve being put on another, but what we deserve being set aside because of the actions of another. These actions achieving the same end as what our eternal hell would have achieved had we went to hell ourselves. It's not our hell being put on Jesus. He's not in hell. The penalty for sin is eternal hell. Christ is not in hell. He's not in hell forever. It's not our penalty being put on Him. Jesus was not beat up by the Father on the cross. Wicked men beat Jesus up on the cross. Evil men bruised Him and slain Him. In all the Father did, in the whole thing, He lifted His hand of protective mercies, and Christ was taken into the hands of wicked men. It's not our penalty being placed upon Jesus, and that's why we're forgiven, because somebody else was beat up instead of us. Christ's willing sufferings on our behalf, different from what we would have deserved. We deserve eternal hell. He went to the cross for 6 hours, beaten and bruised, didn't even look like a man anymore, hanging upon the cross for our sin. And those sufferings He gave of Himself willingly. Not what we didn't deserve a cross. We deserve hell. People look at that, and my friend Jesse, I told you about him yesterday, he would talk about his time when he was first converted whenever The Passion of the Christ, the newer version, came out. And he went to the movies to see it with his friends, and people were saying, Jesus took what I deserved. We deserve a lot worse than just the Roman cross. Now, I'm not speaking lightly of Jesus' death. We deserve eternal hell. That's not what Jesus is suffering here. He suffered differently from what was owed to us. He gave of himself, dying under the hands of wicked men, communicating to the world far better than our hell would have how much God is committed to maintaining His law. That if there would ever been a time God would have said, forget it, I'll just forgive them for no reason at all, it would have been when His own Son was dying on the behalf of us. But even in Christ dying on the behalf of us, God still carried through with the procedure of Christ's death, with no joy involved in it at all. It was not that God enjoyed in the sense of things, as though they were smiling, eating a bag of popcorn while they bruised Jesus' side with a sword, piercing Him. This was not a pleasant thing for everybody involved. But He did it of His own self and of His own will to accomplish what our penalty would have had it been inflicted on us. Jesus' death maintains the influence of the law in showing us how serious God is about how terrible sin is, how much He's committed to maintaining an authoritative government, how faithful He is to His character, and in Christ doing that by substituted sufferings, our penalty is not paid for, it's set aside. It is set aside. God, in forgiveness, passes over penalty. It's a beautiful verse I have to read to you. It's Ephesians chapter 4, verse 23. It says this. Let me see here. Wrong verse. Ephesians 4:32. And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. That's all men now. Best we can. Be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. Now this is really important to get. That word forgiveness there is huge. Huge. That word forgiveness means this. It means to show a favor to be gratuitous, to kindly pardon, to frankly forgive it and forget it, to take a loss. Does that sound like every single bit of debt must be paid before I'm willing to forgive you? I don't see that spirit here. I see God willing to take the loss and pass over what we owe to Him. In Christ's substituted death for us, God is taking the ultimate loss. He's passing over what is due to us. We get what we don't deserve. We deserve hell for all of eternity. But because of Christ's death on our behalf, with alternate sufferings, not what was inflicted or threatened to us, God is able to show this gratuitous favor, taking the loss, show us kindness, and frankly forgive us our debts. People's idea of God is He's this angry banker. You have this debt. Until you pay me every penny up to the penny, there will be no mercy shown. It's not God. It's not the God of the Bible. It's not how He shows Himself. It's not the forgiveness He extends to us. He extends to us a favor and mercy. If we're saved because the utmost debt to the innermost part has been paid, there's no forgiveness shown at all. Where's the forgiveness? Where's the past? Where's the showing the favor? It's not a favor. I don't do a favor to you when I pay you all that you deserve to be owed. Is that a favor? No. I owe it to you. You have that on me. I pay it to you. That's not showing a favor. That's justice. Are we saved by grace or saved by justice? Even in Christ's death for us, God is graceful in that He accepts such sufferings on our behalf. It extends to us mercy. But if the idea of Christ in the atonement is the shedding of blood to the uttermost farthing, that's salvation by justice. God has to forgive now because the debt you owe has been paid by Christ. You can't be condemned. He has to forgive. are you seeing where I'm going with this? There's a lot of false things that come out of that perspective. You ever heard anyone say that Jesus didn't die for everybody? That's a big part of the Christian church. Large portion of it called Reformed theology, Calvinism. And in this theology, they say Christ didn't die for everybody because people go to hell. And since Jesus paid an absolute debt, their view of the cross is a financial transaction. We owe God a debt. He pays the debt for whom He pays. If you go to hell, your debt must not have been paid. So He didn't die for you. Or you get into the idea of what you've heard, universalism, that everybody goes to heaven. They say Jesus died for all, and indeed He did. And that He paid the debt in His atonement. The problem was debt, money. And since the problem of the atonement was money, and Jesus paid the money, and He died for everybody, He paid everybody's money, so everybody gets to go to heaven. The problem in atonement being fixed is not God's emotions, is not financial, it's governmental. How can God how can God be just to His law while showing mercy to the guilty? Therein lies the problem, and therein lies the solution. Christ's death on the cross communicates to the world how faithfully committed God is to righteousness, how faithful He is